Hello everyone, welcome back to the Analyst for 19th June 2024, where we will be discussing 9 most important articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express. In the very first article, we'll be looking at a very interesting piece of editorial by C. Raja Mohan on the 5 international challenges that India is currently facing. In the second article, we'll be looking into the latest news with regarding to the breach of peak power demand in the northern parts of India, and with this regard, we'll be looking into the power scenario in the country. In the third article, we'll be looking into the various ecological and the other concerns related to the Great Nicobar project. In the fourth article, we'll be looking into a very important term in the news that is known as Speaker Pro Tem. And in the fifth article, we'll be looking into the recent blueprint on the cyberspace warfare by the Chief of Defence Staff of the country. And in the end, we'll be looking at 4 more important articles from Prelims point of view, where we'll be discussing news in shorts. So stay tuned. So students, in the very first article, we'll be looking at this piece of editorial by C. Raja Mohan, who writes beautiful articles on international relations, especially when we talk about India's interests. And here we'll be discussing 5 important international challenges that India as a country is facing in 2024, especially when our Prime Minister is on for a third term. And this is a very important piece of article when it concerns GS2, when we look at the effects of policies and politics of the developed and the developing nations on India's interests. Now here, C. Raja Mohan, or the editorial author, is talking about 5 challenges that India is facing on the international arena, and we'll be discussing 5 individual challenges over the 5 slides. We'll be starting with the very first challenge when we talk about the great power rivalry, or when it comes to India's choice of choosing a partner or say like-minded nation in the international arenas. We find that when the Cold War was ongoing, right, in the 1970s, 80s, and when it concluded in 1990s, we found that there was one country which emerged kind of powerful, and also when we discuss about the power, we obviously mean about the economic military power. So it was the US which actually started something which we know as unipolarity. That means from 1990s, or say the time when the Cold War concluded, till say around at 2010s, right, we found that US as a nation was dominating the entire international affairs. After that, we saw the rise of China. China as a nation had actually started their development in the 1980s onwards, and has become a major economic power force in the 2010s and also as of now. So we can understand right now, we find there is a decline in the influence of the US. So we can tell that there is an end of unipolarity, or end of a particular condition in the international relations where the dominance of one country is actually faded away. And this is being also adjusted by major powers, especially China, on the international arena. And also when we find that India during the Cold Wars, India started its international policy, or say foreign policy, on the basis of philosophical basis of non-alignment. That means that be it the USSR back then and or say the US, India would not actively take any side. India would become, or say India and other like-minded nations back then would actually become the third wheel of the international relations, where they would not be siding with any other nations. That is known as non-alignment. But in the present world, India cannot afford this non-alignment, because India has to be with the major trading partners, with the major countries as of now. So this is the main challenge that we see here, that India is having limited maneuvering room, or say India is having a dilemma as to which trade partner or which ally should India be keeping close to. And here we find that with reference to US and Europe, or which we can collectively term as West, India is dependent on them, or say they are also dependent on India based on the trade relations, based on military, based on technology, right? So that is why India and their dependence on the Western nations is very important. When we talk about China, when we discuss China, and when we discuss this particular topic of great power rivalry, we understand that China is on a global stage against most of the Western nations ideologically, and also when it comes to India, India is also, and China is also involved in India with several crises, be it the border crisis or be it trade crisis and so on. But we have to understand China is actually India's, or say India is also China's, vice versa, is actually one of the major trading partners in the region, right? So India cannot straight away isolate itself from China also. When we talk about Russia, right, USSR back then and Russia right now is also a very, very close ally of India. But Russia feels that India's closeness to the US is kind of a signal that maybe in the long term India will not be in Russia's camp for a long period of time. So these are all the challenges that India is actually trying to maneuver or say navigate through in the international arena. And when we talk about China's proximity in the region, we have to talk about the security concerns that China is imposing on India. For example, the presence of Chinese submarines and merchant vessels on the Indo-Pacific, ocean. Then we also talk about the border disputes that China is actually involving India in various sectors of the Indian borders. When we talk about the implication side or what should be done with respect to this challenge, obviously India should be going for a strategic autonomy. And when we talk about strategic autonomy, we mean that India as a nation should not be dependent on others or say one country or two countries or say for example a bloc as a whole. India must be realizing that India's overall international dependence is almost with all of the nations, and that is why we have to understand the strategic autonomy essentially means that India is having its own right and its own say intellectual capabilities to make its own decisions, and it will be not under any strict camp. It will be operating according to their own material interests. That means India's population and India's demographic dividend, India's say growing amount of markets. So these are India's material say interests, and India should be going with that along with power projection on the global stage. Along with this, we find that over a period of time, India is also say engaging with Iran for gaining the port operations over Chabahar port. We also find that France and India is involved in something which we know as Dalliance, or this means the Dassault, right? Dassault aircraft deals that India is having with France. This is trying to boost the strategic autonomy of India by actually increasing the defense capabilities, right? We also find a statement from a major political party in the country who is actually telling that India's foreign policy is not about taking sides, but it is about strategic autonomy. And let me tell you, you can actually use all these examples in your mains answers. This will be definitely adding that kind of value to your answers here. And that is where India should be also trying to promote multilateralism or say resolving disputes or say various amount of trade issues, economic issues at the multilateral platforms such as United Nations, such as WTO. And if we want a proper functioning of the same, we also as a nation, India also as a nation, need to work for the reforms in these institutions too. So this is the first point here. The second point is the global economic changes that is happening over a period of time, because we found that from the 1990s, when the entire world and also India was focused on the liberalization, privatization, globalization reforms, it was meant to make Indian external economy or say be integrated with the globalization trends of the entire world back then. Not only India opened its economy in 1990s, there were many other Asian nations, African nations and also Eastern European nations along with Latin American nations who opened up their economy. And that is where we have to understand back then in the 1990s to around 2000s, right, till the financial crisis took place in 2008, the global economy was kind of globalized, right? And that is an ideal place for an economy or say a global economy. But right now what we are seeing, we are understanding that all of the nations, including China, including US, right, all of the major nations, they are closing their borders, imposing more and more tariffs, imposing more and more restrictions on trade. And this is because of the geopolitical interests, right? We see that there are trade wars. There are trade wars taking place between US and China, and also China between the European nations. And this is not good for a global economy, because we understand the more economy, the more open an economy would be, the greater deal of economic services would be possible, right? And also we find that there is recently various amounts of Western nations, they're trying to reduce the dependence on China. As we can also see from this particular graph here, this graph is showing the trend of Chinese exports to the markets such as EU, Japan and the US. As we can see from 2000s onward, this is on a declining trend. That means over a period of time, the world, or say the Western world specifically, they are decreasing the demand for Chinese goods. And this is why the Western nations, where they will be looking into nations such as India, such as Vietnam, right, such as ASEAN countries or the other Southeast Asian nations, or say Latin America, or say Africa. And that is where India must be capitalizing on. But there are some challenges here. For capitalizing the demands, or say the void, or say vacuum created by the reduced amount of dependence on the Chinese by the Western nations, India must be taking more and more economic reforms, such as spending more on infrastructure, attracting more foreign investments, and say doing away with the bureaucratic hurdles, reducing red tapes and so on. These are some of the issues that India is still facing. Then also we need further integration into the global supply chains. For example, we know the famous example of an iPhone that is not only say manufactured or say designed in a particular nation. It is designed in the US, it is manufactured in China, it is say assembled in various other nations, and it is finally distributed and transported and finally sold in the various markets. So if US is or say the West is alienating China over a period of time, then where will be the manufacturers or Western manufacturers looking into? Obviously India. So that is why India must be part of this global value chain over a period of time, and that is why India has also launched various domestic manufacturing initiatives such as the PLI schemes of various sectors. Then also we find that the global community, or say the Western community specifically, is also concerned about the recent coalition government in the country, because it is supposed that the coalition governments in any nation, they reduce the pace of decision making power of any government. And with the coalition government at the center as of now, the Western nations are actually very uncertain as to what would be the economic policy certainty over a period of time. So this is also one of the challenges that India needs to face, and that is where India must be working on, or say this implicates India must be resolving all these challenges, especially on the economic front, by taking more and more proper economic reforms, by investing more in infrastructure, by attracting more private capital, setting more and more startups, right? So these are the major things that India should be doing. Apart from this, India should be also integrating with the neighboring nations, such as the nations of Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, say the immediate neighborhoods of Southeast Asian nations. They should be also trying to integrate their market with India. Right? Now, the third challenge is, or say the third aspect or third topic here, is technological revolution that is taking place all over the world. We find that technology right now is redistributing power, and this is a major source of power of particular nations. The nations which are ahead in AI, in electronics, in, for example, say critical minerals, or say lithium power batteries and so on, they are far away in race when we talk about the future world, right? So that is where India must be also focusing on. And here there are challenges. For example, the country right now needs modernization with reference to the various technological capacities in the country, right? We need to modernize our sector, we need to empower people, skill them, right? So this is the need of the hour right now, because over a period of time we will be finding that entire economy is actually dependent on the digital framework, right? So that is why we must be strengthening the digital capabilities of the integrating with artificial intelligence, machine learning, satellites and so on. So India must be spending more on this. Apart from this, India must be also collaborating with like-minded nations, specifically the Western nations. And this is also a challenge sometimes, particularly because of high amount of costs and also high amount of sensitive technologies such as nuclear technology and various other things which have to be taken care of. And when we talk about the implications for India, India is right now focusing a lot on Western initiatives, being a part of Western initiatives such as the ISAT, where India is a partner with the United States, which is focusing on critical technology and emerging technologies. It is also focused on various AI alliances and various amounts of technological development in the artificial intelligence arena. Then also India is right now investing a lot on technological infrastructure, particularly we talk about 5G infrastructure and various amounts of space technology and so on, which will be actually boosting India's technological capabilities. And we also understand that when we are a nation of around 1.4 billion people, we find that we are desperately in the need of a skilled workforce, particularly when we are talking about digital future. So this is where our own demographic dividend, which is, according to economic survey, is expected to peak somewhere between 2040 and 2045. We find that the skilled workforce is the prime amount of need as of now. And when we talk about the involvement of the private sector in various public projects, we find this should be strengthening more, or PPP partnerships, PPP projects must be promoted on a larger scales, right? Be it say the collaboration with the domestic firms, or say the international firms such as Microsoft, Google and so on. Government of India must be looking on to the same. And when we talk about improving the ease of doing business, we should be obviously easing the amount of red tapeism, bureaucratic hurdles when we talk about the business aspect, technological aspect. And also we can find here that according to experts, the new normal by 2025 will be tech driven in nature, and nations which are far behind, as we can see here, the nations such as Finland, Singapore, Sweden, they are in the top 5 nations when we talk about integrating technology into the ease of doing, or say ease of living, and also about economic liberalization. We find that the network readiness index, according to this, we have the top 5 nations, and within even the top 10 nations, we do not find India. So if India is to be a part of this, India must be increasing its funding on technology over a period of time. Next, we find that the 4th challenge is that there are right now a lot of regionalism in the world. Now, when we talk about regionalism in India, we find that we have a diversity of regions across the India. We have amounts of cuisines, amount of languages in the country, but we find that over a whole, right, we find that the India is an integral part of the our own cultural identity. But we find that over a period of time, there are some parts of the world, for example, say this Indo-Pacific region, where we find that all of the nations, right, all of the nations in this particular area, they have a shared interest, that is trade and commerce. When we talk about Africa, right, we have the African Union. When we talk about Latin America, we have the various FTAs and the various amount of agreements with reference to the Latin American nations. We find that there is a growth of regional interest in the world as of now, and that is where India must also be focusing on, right? Firstly, we find that, on our own, near our own background, we have this Indo-Pacific. Also, we have new regional engagements. And here the main challenge is accommodating all of the regional groups in India's foreign policy for India, right? We find that Africa, Arab Gulf, Southern Europe, right, they have major fault lines between themselves. For example, in the Arabian region, we find that there are conflicts such as the Israel war which is taking place. In Southern Europe and Europe as a whole, we find there is a Russia-Ukraine crisis taking place. Even in Asia, we have in the Central Asian countries where there are various crises which are taking place. We find that even if these nations, right, which are embroiled in crisis, they are also in partnerships with other like-minded nations. Now, India as a country have to involve with all of the nations, and also have to have a particular stance on the regional issues too. So this is a challenge for them. And also when we talk about resource allocation, India is always having a crunch of resources, be it the amount of loans, be it amount the aid or assistance that the other countries need. India have definitely been proactive in this, but over a period of time, we also find that there have been many delays when we talk about India's promises to various nations with reference to building new roads, schools, colleges, or say giving multilateral assistance and so on. So India is facing this kind of challenge over a period of time. Now, the main implication is that over a period of time, more and more economic corridors must be integrated. For example, we recently have also covered IMEC in the previous analyst sessions, which stands for India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. There should be more corridors like this. There will be more alliances based on solar energy, for example, International Solar Alliance or renewable energies, to actually integrate like-minded nations and do something constructive for the entire world. We must be developing comprehensive strategies based on economic, political and security partnerships. For example, recently we had this Colombo Security Enclave. When we talk about partnerships with Sri Lanka and the like-minded nations in the Indo-Pacific region, securing the security imperatives of the Indo-Pacific region, right? And when we talk about the targeted investments and the diplomatic initiatives, we obviously mean that India as a nation has many investments in countries such as Iran, in Myanmar, in Nepal, Bhutan and so on. So these must be increased even further to develop better economic interests and also regional interest in this region when we talk about India as a, say, partner for these nations. And also diplomatic initiatives, as we will be also seeing in the next slides, for example, various operations, say, for example, giving COVID vaccines, supplying aid to Afghanistan and so on. These also must be strengthened over a period of time. And finally, when we talk about the last, challenge, we talk about having realistic national ambitions. Now, we obviously understand India is actually within the top 5 nations when we talk about the size of the GDP. In PPP terms, it comes to be third in the entire world. So, India as a whole, economy as a whole, it is doing good. But India is actually lagging behind developmental parameters such as skilling imperatives, health imperatives, education imperatives. And also when we compare the HDI index, right, we find that India is also lacking behind nations in the neighborhood such as Sri Lanka, right? So we are understanding that when we have international aspirations, we have to kind of develop a lot on the domestic need of the hour as of now, such as having more welfare development schemes, because as a nation, if the people or say the citizens of the country are not having proper developmental parameters, they cannot sustain themselves on the international stage for a long period of time. So that is where the development parameter is coming. So the main challenge is domestic prosperity with respect to development. And also sometimes India should not be overestimating its national strength when it comes to various international issues and say avoid a potential backlash, and also must not be underestimating internal and external challenges such as internal issues of security and also with China and Pakistan internationally. And the main implication here is that there must be a balance between national aspirations and the realistic capabilities that India can really deliver. If India really wants to be a Vishwaguru in the upcoming 20-30 years, or say ushering India's Amrit Kal by 2047, or becoming a developed nation by 2047, India must be strengthening its demographic dividend as of now. India must be focusing more on the developmental aspirations as of now. Also, as we can see over the last 9 years of the Modi government, as we have seen, that India has actually contributed a lot. For example, with reference to this, you will be given this in the handout. You can find that with reference to Operation Dost, be it evacuation from Ukraine, COVID vaccines, Operation Kaveri, India has actually contributed a lot, not only to its domestic priorities, but also international priorities. And that is the mission going forward, because India cannot be ignored as of now, because the Prime Minister, Modi, matters a lot for the international community. And this is where the Western nations are also finding a strong partner in India, in a strong leadership in our Prime Minister. This is something that we must be proud of, and also we must be having the realistic ambitions going forward too. Now, I have a question for you all here. Do you agree that India needs a reinventing of its foreign policy on the count of geopolitical headwinds or point? So please do write these answers. In the comment section, you can just write the answer in brief and let me know what do you think of this. What do you think of this word reinvent in theme of what we discussed as of now. In the next article, we'll be looking into the power scenario in the country, because over the last 1 month, the northern region of India has been witnessing a record peak power demand due to the prevailing heat conditions. And this is a very important article from Prelims when we talk about economic social development. And also in reference to GS3, we have infrastructure, and here we have energy within the subtopic of infrastructure. And here, when we talk about the trends of energy sources in the nation, we find that the total installed capacity in the country, right, the different amount of energy sources in the country, the most amount of energy is coming from thermal energy, followed by renewable energy, hydro energy, gas, and finally nuclear energy. Now this order is very, very important for you all to follow, right? UPSC can ask some questions on related to the ascending or descending nature of the energy sources, right? Now when we talk about the renewable energy, we find that in renewable energy side, we have solar energy which is dominating in the renewable energy side, followed by wind energy, biomass, and other kinds of or other forms of renewable energy. And here recently we found that the peak power demand in the northern part of India recently crossed. And when we talk about peak power demand, it is the highest amount of energy demanded by the local residents of a particular community or say a particular region, right, based on the various climatic reasons or the various say social economic factors. So this is the peak power demand in India that we see right now, particularly on account of rising heat waves in the nation, and particularly in the northern part of the nation where the temperatures are on an average staying above 40 degrees Celsius in the northern and planes, and that is why the people are demanding more and more ACs, refrigerators, and power energy. Industries are demanding more and more energy. So this is where we find that increasing amount of heat waves is putting a load on our, say, installed capacity, right? And also when we talk about the energy deficit in the states last year, we find that these were the states which were facing energy deficits. You don't have to remember the exact data, just remember the names. For example, Haryana, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh. As you can understand, these are the states in the North India, right? And also when we talk about, say, the amount of requirements that India is facing, or say the shortfall of power that India is facing in North India, India has to import around 25 to 30% of the excess demand from the neighboring nations too, for example like Bangladesh. So this is a very, very serious thing that we understand. India's energy security can be compromised if India does not keep in trend or keep in pace with the current power sector demands. And when we talk about the resource-wise capacity addition, we found that over a period of time, India is adding, right, over a period of time, that is from 2020 financial year, 21, 22, 23, 24, right, we find that India is gradually declining its investment on the thermal power plants. That means the thermal power plants which actually run on coal energy. Now, India as a developing nation is actually dependent on coal, and we have to understand the renewable energies. For example, say the solar energy, wind energy can be very costly for the nation. But despite this, we find there is an increasing trend for the last 4 years when we talk about the renewable energy side. But the same thing that we have to understand, that is this increasing amount of trend adding to say incremental power sources. This is not because there are some issues with solar energy. There are some issues or limitations with solar energy that we will be discussing here. Firstly, we have to understand what caused this. Firstly, the demand supply mismatch. In the summer months, mostly we have seen in the historical scenario, there is a demand supply mismatch because of the high demand of, say, power during the summer months, right? And also when we look at the share in power generation of the various sources of coal-fired, solar energy, hydro and so on, we find that the share in power generation has actually increased with reference to coal power, kind of generation, but actually increased more when we talk about the capacity utilization. That means the existing thermal power plants are being overstressed due to the increased amount of, peak power demand. And when we talk about the solar energy, as we can see here, the share in power generation increased by only 3%, right? But it is not having that much of impact, as we can see, actually decreased by 1%. Just because that in the previous slide also, in this slide also, I will be telling you that because there are some limitations with solar energy or say renewable energy. The same thing you can see with wind energy, that with reference to installed power capacity or share in power generation, the final power is not that much. So India as a nation is actually dependent on the coal energy on a very regular basis, right? So this is the main thing here. And also we found that there is slowdown in the coal capacity. Apart from this, finally we have to understand the limitations in the solar energy or say in the renewable energy. Firstly, we find that when we talk about entire India, right, in India we do not have uniform zones or uniform areas of solar capacity, right? Particularly, first we find the solar energy is only available during the day. What happens during the night? Because during the nights also factories needs to run. People needs energy, right? For this, people actually need to store their energy, maybe, right? Firstly, this is a regional issue that across the parts of the country, there is not enough solar energy across the period of the years. And also when we talk about the extent of solar energy potential, we also find that this is dependent on day and night also. And when we talk about using energy during nights or say some days or say some days where we have the rainy seasons, we find that we have to store the solar energy or say the wind energy and so on. But storage is very, very costly. Batteries and generators are very costly when we talk about this. And finally, we have to understand the cost of setting or investing new solar panels and new solar farms are actually very, very high. And that is why we find that these things actually take a lot of time, right? So over a period of time, maybe these issues will not be there. But right now, in the transition phase from renewable energy, fossil fuels to renewable energy, we'll be having this amount of at least some period of few years. And this peak power demand maybe will be even continuing in the next year or the next year. And here we have to look at some of the government initiatives that the government is right now doing. Firstly, it is importing coal and also energy from the neighboring nations, right? It is trying to raise its import of coal. But we find that more and more amount of coal energy will be obviously putting more and more CO2 in the atmosphere and say raising greenhouse gas emissions, raising the global temperature. But this is not a sustainable trend in the long run. We have to also understand government is right now using the idle gas based thermal power plants and running them as of now to meet the excess demand. India also recently added 4 more gigawatts of excess hydro energy by say retrofitting, by maintaining or say repairing various of the hydropower energy projects in the country. And also India as a nation is focused on many solar and wind initiatives. The solar energy will be looking in the next slide. As we find that India is right now transforming the entire power sector. These are reports according to PIB. We find that the power deficit to power surplus capacity has been achieved by around 175 gigawatts in the last 9 years. That means India actually added this amount of gigawatts in the last years. And also fourth, when we talk about the renewable energy capacity, and when we talk about entire world, it is third in the solar energy capacity according to various private think reports, right? We also have various houses under Saubhagya scheme when we talk about connectivity with reference to solar and various clean sources. We have also 100% electrification on the Dil Dayal Upadhyay Gramin Yojana. 100% village electricity has been supplied. Also with reference to LED prices and the various discount losses, we also find that India has taken concrete steps. Now we have to do something more. We have to give people the power of solar energy, and that is where the Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana was actually launched, where the Prime Minister promised 300 units of free electricity on installation of rooftop solar panels, right? And it has also an outlay of 75,000 crores. It's also a major initiative in the last budget. Also, when we look at capacity building, India is trying to add more and more amount of clean energy in the electricity grid, right? It is trying to achieve India's Panchamrit, achieving renewable energy capacity over a period of time by 2030. India is also trying to have various policy issues with reference to the solar modules, right? Solar modules imports, especially when we understand the solar modules prices internationally has decreased, but India is having high amount of import duties on them, and that is increasing their price. And finally, India is also launching this green hydrogen mission, this national green hydrogen mission, which is trying to promote green hydrogen, right, from energy sources such as solar energy, wind energy, which can be later used to drive energy security of the country. And lastly, we have to look at some of the solar initiatives generation in the nation. This is a very, very important piece of say compilation by Vajiram and Ravi for you all. So please do look at the various important schemes. I will be attaching this in the handouts. Firstly, we have the PM Kusum scheme, which is about the solar power pumps in the agricultural areas to actually decrease the amount of electricity generation from fossil fuels in the fields. We also have the Surya Mitra programs where we look at solar power installation, Atal Jyoti Yojana, street lighting, solar street lighting. We have Shishti scheme, financial initiatives for rooftop solar plants, right? We have green energy corridor scheme for installing new transmission lines, solar parks to build large amount of solar parks in particular areas such as deserts, right? And also international collaborations with like-minded nations such as the International Solar Alliance under the aim of One Sun, One World, One Grid initiative. And for you all, I have one mains question from 2017. Again, I want some of your thoughts in the comments below about what you think about this question. In spite of the adverse economic or environmental impact, coal mining is still inevitable for development. Discuss. So we understand that we discussed that power from the coal sector is actually being increased over a period of time. We also are importing more and more coal, and also we find the limitations with renewable energy. So I gave you this hint, and with this, let me know in the comments what do you think of this. In the next article, we'll be looking into the various concerns into the latest project of Great Nicobar project, and this is a 72,000 crore infrastructure upgrade that the Nicobar Islands will be facing, but this is actually facing a lot of criticism from the environmentalists also. A very, very important part of say your syllabus when we talk about prelims, For economic and social development, geography for mapping. And for GS3, we have infrastructure, conservation, environmental pollution, degradation, and also environment impact assessment. Now let us look into this. Firstly, we will be starting with mapping. Now we understand these are the Andaman Islands on the top and the Nicobar Islands here. We have the Andaman Sea to the east, we have the Bay of Bengal to the west, and in the between or say in between of the two islands we find 10-degree channel here, and here in the Andaman Andaman Islands only we have also this Duncan passage here. And when we look at the various individual islands, we find that there are around 836 islands. Only out of this 31 are inhabited. Okay, that means out of this almost more than 800 islands are uninhabited. Okay, we find we have the North Andaman here, Middle Andaman, and finally we have the Little Andaman, and in between only we have Port Blair, which is the capital of the entire Andaman and Nicobar Islands Union Territory. Then we have Car Nicobar, we have the Sombrero Channel, and finally we have the Little Nicobar, and finally Great Nicobar. So we find that the southernmost extent is the Great Nicobar Islands. So please be very thorough from the with the various islands from north to south. For example, starting from North Andaman, you should be knowing that after this we have Middle, we have Port Blair, and in between also forgot to tell you we have the Barren Island, right, which is actually India's only active volcano, it is thought to be dormant, but it is still spewing out major forms of lava and ash, right? And let me know in the comments that Andaman and Nicobar Islands are more close to Chennai or Kolkata. Okay, and also we find that at the southern tip we have Indira Point, which is actually the southernmost point of India as a whole, right? In the comments, and again let me know what is the southernmost point of Indian mainland. Okay, and finally this entire islands is having maritime borders with Indonesia, Myanmar and Thailand. And finally again in the comments let me know that which of the nations here is actually more close to Andaman Nicobar Island. Okay, so we need I need three things from you. Firstly, which is more close, Kolkata or Chennai, right? And what is the southernmost point of India's mainland? And finally, what country is actually closest to in Andaman and Nicobar here? Okay, now here we'll be looking at two important PYQs from prelims point of view from 2017 and 18. And again, I want your answers in the comment section below, right? And here I want to let you know a small trick of solving UPSC prelims questions. As you can see, look at this 2018 questions. Don't you find contradiction in statement number 1 and statement number 3? Those of you who have found the contradiction, again in the comment let me know what do you think of the contradiction. So if you found this contradiction, that means there are some statements in this question only which are contradicting themselves. You will be finding the answer. So let me know that in the comments again. Okay. Now with this, we'll be looking into details of the project here. Firstly, we'll be having a look at the mapping of Nicobar Islands as of now when we talk about the Great Nicobar Island. In the Great Nicobar Island, we have two national parks, the Campbell Bay National Park and the Galathiya National Park. Very, very important points. And along these islands only, we'll be having the various projects. So that, for example, in this project we'll be setting up an international airport which will be started from scratch. That is why it is known as Greenfield International Airport. We'll be having a major international container transshipment portal where we will be having this amount of state-of-the-art architecture for the ports. And finally, we'll be also understanding that this islands will be having a parallel to the coasts mass rapid transit system, for example such as metro facilities or say local train facilities, right? And also there will be a greenfield township, that means our entire town also will be built in this particular period of time. And also when we talk about power plants, LNG power plants will be set up, and also diesel power plants, and also solar panels will be set up. Estimated cost is around 75,000 crores, and there will be around 1.28 lakhs jobs which will be generated out of this project. And this project was actually given a green signal after a report by the Niti Aayog, which actually supported the cause of mega infrastructure projects. And this will be implemented by the Andaman and Nicobar Islands Integrated Development Corporation, right? So these are all the developmental activities which will be taking place. And why they will be taking place? Because of the strategic interest, as we can see. Firstly, we find that Andaman and Nicobar Islands are located just nearby the Straits of Malacca. which are actually known as one of the major global sea lanes of communications, or SLOC, sea lanes of communication. We find a lot of major trade, international trade passes from Straits of Malacca, because this is the shortest route to the rest of the Pacific Ocean, and further to the US and say the American continents, and also to China and Russia, and also to Japan and South Korea. So we find that this is a major sea lane port, and this is where the the islands are. So we find that India can actually reap maritime economic dividends, trade dividends from the development of this region, right? Also, we find that recently China is trying to build up, say, their presence in this particular region, right? So that is also, we will be building more and more air base, naval bases, radar systems, submarine cables, sensitive say equipments along the exclusive economic zones around the Nicobar Islands, to actually facilitate the intelligence gathering, and also the close surveillance of all the Chinese activities and the activities of other nations which can be against India at some point of time. So this is where we have to understand India is focusing on this project so much. But again, we find that there are many issues with respect to this project. Firstly, we find that there is this community known as the Shompen tribe, and these are the PVTG's tribe, or say particularly vulnerable tribal groups. That means they are very traditional, they are not integrated with the mainland country, and also if this project goes on, these will be the tribal sections which will be impacted more, right? Also, we find that to develop this, there will be amount of 8.5 lakh trees which will be felled or deforested. So this will be posing a major ecological concerns. Also, this project will be destroying around 600 species of flora and fauna, including wild pig, which is native to Nicobar Island, right? The great Nicobar crested serpent eagle, the Nicobar paradise flycatcher, and the Nicobar megapode, which is a bird species and belongs to vulnerable under IUCN. It will be also threatening this giant leatherback turtle, which is also classified as vulnerable under IUCN. So these are the species which will be impacted a lot here. And here, threats to the coral system and the marine system will also be there, because according to ZSI, Zoological Survey of India, there are around 100 species of corals in the Galathea Islands. And also the environmental impact assessment by the Niti Aayog, as we also seen a report by Niti Aayog and the various environmental impact assessment, they did not look into this coral aspect at all. And also we have the dugongs, right, which are sea mammals, and these are they will be also be affected with reference to this impact of the development of the seagrass meadows and the various anthropogenic activities. So here we have to understand that this is a place of our country which is actually very serene, not untouched by any human habitation as of now, and any changes will be having drastic effect on them. So that is why we should be doing a thorough review, preferably via the parliamentary committees. Then we should be immediately suspending all of the clearances as suggested in the Niti Aayog reports, because we have looked at the various ecological and the various impacts here. So we have to understand that these clearances must be stopped, and even according to a recent NGT 2023 directive, a high-powered committee must be set up for the clearances, but still now there are no committees which have been set up as of now. Then also there must be consultation with the local tribal councils, because in 2022 November, with reference to this project, the tribal community actually took back the no objection certificate that they had given to the developmental authorities. That means they no longer want this kind of great scale of development as of now, because of the obvious reasons, right? And finally, India as a whole, India as a nation must be balancing strategic interests with ecological and social impacts. It can be going forward with the military presence, it can be going forward with the naval based presence and say the security aspirations, but with reference to the major amount of commercialization of the island, maybe it is not a good idea. And finally, it is very, very important that these kind of news be reported in the media. We do not find that these news of these particular vulnerable tribal groups or these people, this innocent people's stories being represented on the daily prime news. So we have to actually raise the awareness of the public, so the public is actually aware of this kind of development and can also raise their voice for or against this project. And for you again, I have a question for mains, a practice question for mains. It runs as: the economic growth of the nation can be a double-edged sword. Discuss this in the light of the Great Nicobar project. Again, in short, let me know in the comments what you think of this. In the next one, we will be looking at Pro Tem Speaker, because it is expected that recently the Pro Tem Speaker would be appointed, and this is a very important part for your prelims for Indian polity and governance and for GS2 Parliament and State Legislature. And here, according to Article 94, when we talk about the dissolution of the Lok Sabha and the coming of the new government, we find that whenever the House of the People or Lok Sabha is dissolved, the Speaker shall not vacate his office until immediately before the first meeting of the House. So when there will be a first meeting which will be convened, the Speaker from the last term will be serving, because it can be that the Speaker is not even elected, right? So, but the Constitution, according to Article 94, is telling that for the first meeting, the last Speaker should be there, and by then there will be a new Speaker, or say for the time being Speaker, or say a temporary Speaker, which is known as Pro Tem, Speaker Pro Tem. And there is no reference for this in the Constitution of the country, right? But there is a reference of this in the handbook on the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs. And here, this, according to this handbook, the appointment and swearing in of the Pro Tem Speaker is actually spoken of, and the duties of the Speaker or the Speaker Pro Tem is to be performed by a member of the House appointed for this purpose by the President as Speaker Pro Tem. Right, so this will be a temporary provision, and when the final Speaker will be elected by simple majority, then this Pro Tem Speaker will no longer be the Speaker again, right? And it is by convention to appoint the senior most members as the say Speaker Pro Tem. And when you talk about the senior most member, we are not talking about age, we are talking about years of membership of the House, that means experience in the Lok Sabha. And according to Article 99, every member of the House shall, before take his seat, make and subscribe before the President or some person appointed in that behalf by him on oath or affirmation according to the form set out for the purpose in the third schedule of the Constitution. In the third schedule of the Constitution, we have oaths taken by the MPs, MLAs and so on, right? So we have to understand that the President of the country can appoint some person, and this person is actually the Pro Tem Speaker for administering that oath, because the Speaker is no longer there. The last Speaker is no longer there. So the temporary Speaker will be doing all the work there. And here, the Pro Tem Speaker will be administering also new MPs, and how the person will be selected. Firstly, Speaker Pro Tem candidate, or say a potential MP will be chosen, along with 3 other MPs will be chosen when the new government will be formed. Then legislation 1 section of the Government of India, they will be screening out one list of MPs of, say, based on the seniority in the House. And then the Minister of Parliamentary Affairs, or say the Prime Minister, will be looking at the list, and this will be and finally will be finalizing 4 names. Firstly, the person who will be Speaker Pro Tem and the 3 MPs, and this consent of these members is required after that, after which the Prime Minister will be seeking the approval for the appointment by the President of the country, and finally the President will be administering the oath to the Speaker Pro Tem, and along with this 3 other MPs also will be administered the oath, not by the President but by the Speaker Pro Tem. Now, what is the main role of these 3 other MPs? This is actually to help the Speaker Pro Tem administering the oath of more than 500 MPs in the country. So Speaker Pro Tem alone, he or she cannot do the same. Actually, he needs or she needs the help of other MPs, in this case 3 MPs. In the next one, we will be looking into the Chief of Defence Staff's recent blueprint on the cyberspace warfare. Recently, General Anil Chauhan actually gave this blueprint on how to combat the cyberspace warfare. And that is why we have to understand the importance of cyberspace is increasing over a period of time. As we can see, according to the various cyber attacks all around the world, right? 44.8% of the cyber attacks are not even identified from which countries they're actually originating from. Next in the list will be China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, Ukraine, US, Pakistan, Turkey and other nations. So we find that India as a country is actually facing various amount of risks from the various hackers and the cyberspace criminals. And also there can be some countries such as China and Russia, right, which can actually wage war on the cyber platforms, on the information technology platforms, on the army installations, on the air force installations, on the hospitals, airports of the country. So this will be like declaring an online war. And this is why the armed forces right now have to be prepared. That is why a joint doctrine of cyberspace warfare has been released, where there will be a uniform approach, right, according to all of the armed forces. And here the challenges of the cyberspace, according to Mr. Anil Chauhan, General Anil Chauhan, is that cyberspace do not have any borders. Right, we in the real warfare, we know that there are particular borders of the countries and so on, right? But in the online space, we do not have any borders. We have shared sovereignty, right? So anyone can anywhere can attack anything in the country on the online medium. And also that is why we have to have an integrated approach with the broader national security strategy. And the main focus of this doctrine is to educate military personnel, providing guidance on the various information technology and the various amount of cyberspace warfare that can take place, raising awareness among the soldiers that this is actually true. That means whenever there will be some spywares or malwares on their smartphones and so on, the soldiers themselves have to be very careful, right? There have been many cases of or instances of espionage taking place directly from Pakistan on Indian Navy or Army, say, officers' mobile phones. And also we must be training more and more commanders and staff officers on this particular doctrine. And finally, we have to also look at the chief of defense staff here. And here we have to understand the chief of defense staff right now. He is under the Department of Defense, headed by the Defense Secretary. After this, the Department of Military Affairs is actually headed by the CDS. Now CDS runs back a long period of time when India was embroiled in a conflict with Pakistan. Infamously in the Kargil War. The Kargil War Review Committee suggested that India must be having this amount of integrated command theaters. That means these are actually the spaces where Indian armed forces must be integrated together over this, say, unique security challenges across unique theaters. We have the Western theater, we have Northern, we have Southwestern and the Southeastern. So it recommended that there must be various theaters based on the various convergence of the military applications, and also there must be a CDS to supersede or say manage all of the theaters together. And this was according to Kargil Committee report. And after this, in 2002, we have this integrated defense staff, which is now the CDS Secretariat. Right? After this, we have this Naresh Chandra Committee in 2012, which actually set up this permanent chairperson of Chiefs of Staffs Committee. Right? Then under DB Shekhar Committee, we found that finally the CDS post was conceptualized and it was formulated too. And here, right now the CDS is single point of military advisor, and he is having the rank of secretary. He can issue directives to the 3 chiefs of, say, Army, Navy and Air Force. And also, he is also playing an advisory role in the Nuclear Command Authority. In the final part, we'll be looking at 4 more prelims articles. We'll be starting with PM Kisan. Recently, 20,000 crores has been released in the 17th installment to around 10 crore farmers or 9.26 crore farmers in the country. This is a direct benefit transfer where the money is directly sent to the bank accounts of the people. And when we talk about DBT, it is around 6,000 rupees. It is exactly 6,000 rupees per year. It is sent to the farmer families, to all of the farmer families, right? And also the economic DBT is sent directly to the bank accounts. And we find that the eligibility will be land holding farmers in the country. Exclusions are also there. There will be some households who will not be included in this scheme. For example, the households which are paying income tax, constitutional post holders, ministers, MLA, MLCs, and also the government employees, excluding the Group D sectors. And this is the most important thing that we have to know under PM Kisan. Recently, the scientists have found a black hole which was sleeping and suddenly it woke up. But we have to understand what is a black hole. Now, see, when we talk about black hole, we find that a black hole is a very dense and heavy object in space. So if we consider space as a fabric or piece of cloth and we place a heavy object on that fabric will be depressed from down. Right? That means that whatever mass, say stars, planets, clouds, nebulas, around that particular heavy object, they will be immediately sucked inside. Just similar as we can find that when we have water, when we have water full in our sink, don't we try to spin the sink and say solve the issue, right, of water logging. So this same thing happens where this all of the masses, all of the components, all of the space starts to be squeezed inside the black hole. So this is black hole where even beyond this event horizon, which is a component of the black hole, as we can see here in this particular figure, and also we can see this event horizon in this particular thing here, we find that beyond this event horizon, not even light cannot escape. But if anything is just outside event horizon, or just say a particular radius from the black hole center, it can escape the black hole here, right? And that is why outside the event horizon, the escape velocity can be less than speed of light, so it can actually escape. But if anything which has fallen inside the black hole and it wants to go out, it has to travel faster than the speed of light. And because even light cannot escape, that is why we also know that as black hole. It doesn't mean that nothing is there. Obviously something is there. Scientists are still figuring out what exactly is inside a black hole, but the main reason it is black because not even light can escape, but that does not mean that it is empty. Okay, the singularity is the center of the black hole, but it would be very controversial if I call it center. So we can approximate it is kind of near the center of the black hole, right? Also we have photon sphere. And also a relativistic jet, which is a mass of skewed particle, light and other particles which are thrown out of the black hole, right? These are all the things that you want to know here. And recently the scientists are still wondering as to how a black hole which was dormant, which was not pulling in matter, right, which just suddenly woke up and started doing this activity. So this is the news, but still scientists are figuring out what exactly happened. In the next one, we'll be looking into the Kavach system, which supposedly did not work in the latest rail accident in West Bengal. Now, Kavach system is a complicated system using various radio antennas, GPS satellites, and also the GPS antennas aboard the trains. And this actually works in such a way that whenever two trains, right, on similar routes, on say dissimilar routes, which may be at one time coming too close together, it will be automatically communicating this movement to the satellites, to the two of the trains, and the satellites will be taking direct control of the trains and automatically applying the brakes. So this is an automatic system, a very safe and secure system, which is drastically reducing the scope of the accidents. And here we have to understand, we have various amount of technology, radio communication, which are involved here, but this we have to understand in the context of automatic application of brakes in the chance of a potential rail accident. Finally, we'll be looking into angel tax. Imagine these are angels and imagine these are startups. Startups require a lot of money because they are the new company. They need more and more clients, more funds and so on. That is why these angel people, right, are giving a lot of money to them. And who are these angel people? Obviously people who have high, say, net worth, for example, high amount of money with themselves. This can be rich individuals, sometimes even can be firms. Okay. Now, according to section 56 of the Income Tax Act, angel investors will be taxed a certain amount of income that are coming from their investment in the startups. Now, obviously when the angel investors are giving the startups money, the investors are investing something, and whatever the startups will be earning, a portion of that earning will be going back to the angel investors, right? So here this kind of tax is levied on such angel investors who are investing their money on unlisted companies and unlisted startups. Unlisted means they are not listed on the stock markets, okay, and they are generally taxed because the company's actual value, or say startup's actual value, is far more than the government has actually calculated it, and this is also known as the market value of the company. The difference is actually tax, whatever the difference will be between this, on income from other sources at the rate of 30.6%. The exemptions will be those startups which are recognized by the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. Though the startups which are recognized by DPIIT, they will be exempted from angel tax. The main reason is because there can be some startups or companies which can be shell companies, and some individuals can invest black money in the shell companies and be generating profits, a lot of profits. So that is why, to curb this, angel tax has been introduced, particularly because shell companies are not listed on the stock exchanges. Also, this is to do a lot of aspect of tax compliance to increase the government revenues, right, and also to actually bring the correct valuation of the startups and also tax a percentage of the profit of the startups and also the investors that will be giving again revenue for the government. So with this, I thank you all for being a very patient audience today. Do let me know everything which we have discussed in the comment section, and do also follow whatever the quiz is following up right now. All the best till we meet again soon. Thank you.